Welcome, everyone, to today's interview with my guest, Amirah Zaky. This is a part of our Womb Wellness Week. So, if you've been with us so far, welcome back. And if this is your first time joining, welcome again. I'm your host, Chantal Blake, founder of Honored Womb and author of Peaceful Periods, Holistic Womb Care for Teens. So, today I have the honor of welcoming my real sister, my real life sister and friend, as well as my colleague and companion, Sister Amirah Zaky. She's a sex educator based in the UK. Through her company, Amirah Zaky Wellness, she's helping women overcome vaginismus. And so, if you're not familiar with that, it's challenges with penetrative intercourse. So she helps women learn how to experience greater sexual pleasure within marriage, and she has a variety of amazing online courses, and she has a team of coaches who help women overcome vaginismus. And I invited her today because I often see a connection and a thread between women who have painful periods as well as people who experience painful intercourse. And this common denominator is pain. So I invited Amirah to share with us a little bit about this messaging, where it originates from, how it shows up, and what we can do to kind of uncouple this association with pain in our lives. But first, we will begin with Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam, Chantal. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Alhamdulillah. Thank you for being here. I always see the normalization of pain, and obviously it comes up in your work. What do you think some of this early messaging is coming from? Why are we accepting and tolerating some kinds of pain, but seeing other kinds of pain as intolerable, unacceptable? What is that for you? What are you thinking?
So I'd say automatically the kind of pain that I would say people are taught to not kind of avoid or to kind of negate or anything, I would say comes from, is it something that is life-threatening? And if so, you need to go and get checked by a professional, which makes sense. That's important. But I think in terms of pain that perhaps is not so life-threatening, or pain that affects women, especially, or girls, I feel like a lot of it is disregarded as, oh, that's normal, or, oh, you're meant to feel that. I see it a lot in the work that I do when it comes to penetrative sex, especially when it comes to messaging around first-time sex. The messaging that a lot of people have grown up with that still exists now is first-time sex is meant to be painful. And so it's just seen as this kind of rites of passage that every woman, whenever she has penetrative sex for the first time, it's just meant to hurt. You're meant to put up with it. And that's really, really unfortunate because it causes a lot of fear within a lot of women and really affects their first-time sexual experience. And so when it comes to things like period pain, again, I feel like the messaging is very similar. I've seen and witnessed personally myself, I've grown up in the UK. When I went to secondary school and we learned about periods, we learned that periods are meant to hurt, or periods hurt for girls. It's this painful week of your life that happens every single month. It's just something you're meant to put up with. And here's how to maybe manage the pain, such as through painkillers or putting something warm on your womb area, which is fine. Putting something warm there is fine. But I feel like the messaging is still there of, oh, this is just meant to hurt. And so I feel like when girls or women experience painful periods, because they were taught that it's meant to happen, they feel like they've just got to kind of put up with it. And they don't realize that actually it could be a sign that they need help with it. And so it's really unfortunate that the messaging seems to be coming from so many different places, from school, from things we may see on TV, or things that we may see online or on social media. It seems that it's coming from culture as well, the culture that you grow up in. Girls growing up may witness their mums or the women in their culture experiencing painful periods. I also feel like it might have something to do with kind of the patriarchal sorts of society a lot of us are still growing up in, where female pain is kind of disregarded just as much as female pleasure is disregarded. And so I think, and one more thing I wanted to mention is, I feel something that's not helping with regards to this messaging about pain is a lot of people are still growing up in families where talking about intimate topics, sexual health topics, reproductive health topics, those kinds of topics are kept very hush-hush in a lot of families. So that sort of taboo nature of not being able to openly ask questions or talk about these things adds to the pain, whether it's physical pain or the mental and emotional pain as well.
Definitely. I mean, I think that point you said about the patriarchy, right? It's like, can you still produce? Because productivity is king, right? So as long as you're still able to produce and do things and function and earn, then just bleed and carry on, right? And so
Yeah.
I think that's so important what you said. The expectation is already set for there to be pain. And I actually see that in a lot of the puberty content. There's a ton of books on puberty, and it's always just how to deal with pain, but no one's
Mm.
really challenging why are you experiencing pain and what
Yeah.
can you be doing that contributes to that pain or can alleviate it. It's not just a stroke of luck, but again, if the expectation is not set, then of course people just think, oh, I just kind of hang on with it or just go through it. And like you said, there really isn't an opportunity to kind of step away and be critical of it. If you can't even talk about it, then how can you
Mm.
critique it?
Yeah.
I often also think that there's definitely some concepts that come through about your period being a curse or a burden of being a woman, and I think
Yeah.
that's so damaging too. Like, okay, pain is just going to follow you, painful
Mm.
periods, painful intercourse, painful childbirth. It's just a part of being a woman or womanhood, and I really think that yeah, it's important. We have an opportunity to really uncouple that idea
Hmm.
that pain is a necessary part of this other thing. And
Yeah.
so, with your work, what are you witnessing when women finally start to be able to see one without the other, where they are actually separating the pain from the experience that they've thought it had to necessarily accompany for so
Mm.
long?
Yeah. So before I answer that question, a thought just came to my mind of actually why this is so important that we're talking about this. Because I remember with regards to sex, I grew up with the messaging that first time sex is meant to hurt. And when I did try to have sex for the first time with my husband and it did hurt for me, I remember sort of blaming God. So after
Mm,
I tried to have sex and I found it really painful, I spent some time, probably a few days, just reflecting on why is this so painful for me? Am I ever going to get over this pain? And then I started sort of thinking negatively about God and kind of blaming God. That's the kind of point in my life where I started thinking, why, God, did you choose for me to be a woman? Why, God, did you make it that women have to experience pain? Like a lot of the time, women are afraid of childbirth because there's that pain messaging associated with it. And similarly, I was like, why is my husband not experiencing pain when he's trying to have sex with me? But it's me who experiencing pain. It just felt very unfair. I started
mm,
blaming God, and it very much affected my relationship with God in that moment. So that's why I just wanted to point that out because of how important it is for us to talk about this. Because had I known that actually, Amirah, it's not meant to hurt the first time, and if it is hurting, there's a reason, and we can figure out what the reason is for you, and we can figure out how to overcome that. That is really important because then I probably wouldn't have reached that low moment of faith in God. I probably would have done the opposite and thought, okay, it's painful for me. Ya Allah, please help me to overcome this pain, rather than
mm,
kind of it affecting my spirituality in that way. So it is really important. In terms of what I experience with my clients who a lot of my clients come to me where they are experiencing very painful penetrative sex. A lot of my clients either diagnose themselves or have been diagnosed with the condition vaginismus. A lot of women come with this very negative view of themselves. They are very critical of themselves, thinking that there's something wrong with them. And that then has a very detrimental effect on their self esteem and
mm,
therefore affects their confidence in so many areas of their life. Literally will affect all areas of their health, mentally, emotionally, physically. It will have a very big impact on their relationship and their marriage, and can a lot of the time have an impact on their relationship with God, because they feel like, why me, that sort of thing. And it's a very horrible place to be in. And so when when women work towards realizing that sex is not meant to be painful and they remove sex from pain, like they're two separate things, and if they're together, it's not because they're meant to be together. There's a reason why you're experiencing pain during this experience. So when they realize that it's not meant to be painful, it's like the first stepping stone in building up their confidence, because they had a knock in their self-esteem, thinking that it's just them who's going through this, or they're a failure or whatever, and then they realize, okay, it's actually not meant to be painful. It's actually not my fault. There's a reason that is not necessarily to do with them, but it's more to do with it's more to do with usually a lack of education. And that's not really necessarily something that we need to blame on anyone or anything. It just kind of is what it is based on the time that we live in, that we haven't fully reached a point in the world where everyone or every girl and every woman is educated that periods are not meant to hurt, sex is not meant to hurt. But when they do come to that realization as an adult woman, it's like that first stepping stone in building the confidence. So they then take the next step of going on that journey of educating themselves about their body, which is extremely important in the work that we do. Just knowing little things about our hormones, about our pelvic floor muscles, about our womb, make the biggest difference for a lot of women, and is literally the way that women are able to overcome penetrative sex and the way that women are able to overcome vaginismus, merely through things like just knowing that their pelvic floor muscles need to be relaxed for penetrative sex to happen. That little bit of information, which might seem little but makes a big difference, them knowing that for the first time, learning that for the first time, is kind of mind-blowing for a lot of women. Like, a lot of women will tell me that they wish they were taught this when they were younger, and they're learning this for the first time, and so they're now training those muscles to get into a relaxed position. So it's really important, and I really feel like talking about periods and sex and even childbirth needs to be seen in the same way as other things that involve physical movement or involve our bodies physically. There is definitely the mental, emotional, and spiritual side of things, but I just want people to think of any kind of physical activity shouldn't really involve pain. Like, even things like working out, if it's painful, you shouldn't keep doing that thing. There's a reason it's painful. It's a sign that something is going on and you need to stop and assess. Same with like walking shouldn't be painful. Running shouldn't be painful. Yes, there might be moments of discomfort, but it should never be like painful. It should not be like excruciating discomfort or pain. And if there was, like, just think of the example of eating shouldn't be painful, but if someone was having pain in their mouth from eating, that's a sign that they need to get it checked out, because it's not normal. And I feel like that's the same thing with periods. If someone is experiencing pain, it's not normal. Even if it's common, it's not a normal thing. It's a sign. It should be like a flag of this needs some assessment. I need to get this checked and figure this out, inshallah, for it to be resolved.
Definitely. I mean, what I've experienced is that just the notion that periods can and should happen and occur without pain, for especially for clients who have had period pain for so long and so intensely, initially there's almost a sense of like offense. Like, what are you even saying to me? Because my whole life has been riddled by this kind of pain. And I think it almost feels offensive for you to suggest that you don't have to have this experience, because then you get into those questions. Why wasn't I told? Why wasn't I prepared? Why wasn't I equipped for this moment, or why wasn't I given this understanding? So oftentimes, especially with clients who've had really challenging periods for a really long time, initially I find that they're very almost upset that they've endured something for so long that they're now discovering that they didn't need to or didn't have to. But like you said, on the other side of that uncoupling, I think there is this opportunity to see who you are and how Allah designed you in your optimal state. And then it's like, I'm not mad that I'm a woman anymore. I'm not cursing the fact that I'm a woman anymore. I remember one woman who attended a program that we did. She said, for the first time in my life, I actually feel happy to be a woman. And this is someone who always thought that men and boys around her had the leg up and had the advantage. And I think that's so powerful, because ultimately, at the end of the day, if we can feel that same sense of awe and wonder about our bodies and about our design as we see things in nature, right? The sunsets and the trees and all of these things we find so beautiful and breathtaking. I'm also imagining a world where we see that and have that kind of awe and wonder in how Allah designed our bodies, right? How we've been created and how we've designed, and for people to see themselves as a sign of God, as a reminder that you are a created being, and that you have a creator who is, you know, who created you with intelligence and design. But again, like you said, this idea that, oh, pain, no problem. Pain is always a flag, right? It's always an indicator. And, you know, it really is a disservice when we just say, okay, well, this kind of pain, just bear through it. But other kinds of pain, you know, takes, you know, then you get an intervention when it's a certain kind of pain. But I know women who pass out, you know,
Mm.
people tell me
Yeah.
I have to call the ER. I faint. I
Yeah.
mean, how can you feel confidence in the body and vessel you were given and chosen, like if it's causing so much difficulty? So that, thank you for speaking to that moment of questioning God and having like a spiritual conflict and needing to resolve like a you know, a spiritual issue that came up for you when you were having that experience, because I think it is true and we can't just talk around it but really speak to that.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I think that more and more of us, especially women, but actually anyone, needs to see pain as just an indicator that your body is communicating with you. Your body's sending you a message, and it's really important to receive that message, open that message, pay attention to that message, and get help for it. Like I would say, pretty much the majority of women's and men's lives, girls and boys' lives, you know, they shouldn't experience pain, but pain does happen. And so when it does happen, it's just seeing it as, oh, okay, I'm receiving that message now, and let me pay
Mm.
attention to that message, rather than thinking that the body was created to frequently experience pain. It's, if there is pain, it's a message, and I need to take action rather than ignore it. I think that will be really helpful for a lot of people to have that, maybe that worldview, with knowing that yes, we do experience pain, but I think maybe some people also feel like maybe they were raised where tolerating pain is seen as you kind of being a hero,
Mm.
or being more successful. The more pain you go through, the more you kind of grind through life and struggle. And so I feel like some people might have that idea with regards to pain of, if I can get
Yeah.
through this, I can, I can get through anything, which might be true, but is that really the best way to live through life, where you devote all of your energy to like managing and tolerating this pain, rather than, you know, diverting that energy to more empowering things in your life?
I mean, who, I don't even know where this comes from. It's such a part of the culture, no pain, no gain,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
And it's
yeah,
like we have to really create a whole new vernacular for how we want to relate to pain. And like you said, pain is just information. Pain is not punishment. That's
yeah.
another thing that people think it's a punishment for X, Y, or
Mm,
Z. But pain
yeah,
is information. And I think that's really important. Like, even in the context of working out and, like you said, physical activity, pain is information. And what you do with that information is where you really find the power. I think, you know, being able to really sit with it like, oh, you know, maybe this is my body telling me that there's not enough safety in my body, there's not enough relaxation, or there's too much intensity, or things are moving too fast.
yeah,
I think that's also another space where people could definitely benefit from having. We have to like really rebrand the messaging around pain.
yeah.
So we've spent so much time talking about pain. So take us to the opposite of pain, because I think even sometimes people have a hard time identifying what is pain exactly. You mentioned discomfort and
Mm.
pain, and then I think there can be some really blurry lines there. So maybe if we look at it in its opposite, what do you see as the other end of this spectrum, and how can we experience more of it in our lives generally?
Yeah, and actually, I'm glad you said that, because I'm not against discomfort. I actually
Mm-hmm.
feel like discomfort, whether it's physical discomfort or mental and emotional discomfort, spiritual discomfort, can actually sometimes for some people be a good thing. It's like you might have heard of the phrase of like getting out of your comfort zone is where you experience growth personally, spiritually, and that sort of thing. And I do agree with that. I feel like there is a difference between discomfort and pain. I don't know how qualified I am to help people distinguishing the two, but if I feel like maybe what might help people in deciding whether is this just like kind of temporary discomfort, or is this something that is frequently happening in terms of intensity, like feeling really that it's affecting you negatively, spiritually, mentally, and so on? Whereas, is it something that's discomfort that's temporary, but is going to help me physically, spiritually? So, in the example of working out, there might be discomfort in doing a certain exercise move, but you don't feel like it's making you see working out in a negative way. It's making you view working out as, oh, my body is getting stronger, versus pain, where the intensity is so high that it's like you're cursing your body, or you're just like having a very negative relationship with your body, or having a negative relationship with working out. So I think that might help people kind of distinguish between, is this just kind of temporary discomfort, or is this like intense pain that is a message that my body is trying to send me, a message that we need to stop and reflect, sort of thing. In terms of the opposite of pain, I would say there are a couple of things that come to mind. And I would say it's this kind of balance or fusion of comfort, harmony, pleasure. That's kind of what comes to mind for me. Like feeling that there's balance, feeling like your body or your mind just feel calm, and you just can sometimes feel pleasure, but it doesn't always have to be pleasure. It can just be
Mm-hmm.
this feeling of like peace and comfort. I feel like that is kind of how I feel people need to feel within their bodies and within their mind. So that to me is kind of the opposite of pain. And I think it's really important that people understand that if that's not how they're feeling within their body right now, it usually is going to require some steps that a person takes, in terms of such as like educating themselves, seeking help, reading books about the thing that they're struggling with. So yeah, I'm not sure if that answers the question, but that's what comes to mind.
It does. I mean, I think it's so important to make sure that people don't see absence of pain as ex- the exact opposite of pain. Obviously, right? Like having pain and not having pain is one thing, but I think if we contrast it against pleasure, which is like actually feeling really good, you
Mm-hmm.
know, and I think it's something that I am noticing that people will often be like, yeah, I'm good because they don't feel anything bad. But
Mm-hmm.
are you aware when you really feel good? Like, if
Mm-hmm.
I were to ask you right now, what feels pleasurable to you in this moment? You know, how does it feel to, like, what food that you really enjoy eating that feels consciously good to you? You know, I think that's, if we can bring our awareness to more the things that feel pleasurable, um, I think it'll help us also get clarity on, like, not just accepting neutrality, like you can actually feel good in your experiences. And how do we amplify that is, I think, bringing our attention to, like, of all of the choices of things I have to wear or do or eat, or how I move or dress in this moment, I can make a conscious choice to what's most pleasing to me. It doesn't always have to be functional. I feel like sometimes our choices are so functional, like,
Yeah.
okay, there's no pain, I'll just get along with the thing. But it's like, what's actually on the other side of that? What
Mm.
actually feels very um, enjoyable on a sensory level or an
Yeah.
emotional level, right? What really feels good to you. And a lot of people have a hard time answering that, I find, you know, or they
Definitely.
feel like pleasure is just in a little box that's
Mm-hmm.
on a shelf, and you
Mm-hmm.
just open it for a set time and it's like, oh, pleasure is here. But it's like, what's your relationship with pleasure in your
Yeah.
life? And I think the more that we can bring our awareness to pleasure, I think that's also a pathway of getting out of pain, because we
Yeah.
can sit with, you know what, this other thing feels better to me, and I can choose that instead of this other, you know, or
Yeah.
I am in this moment, but you know what actually feels better to me right now is to slow down, or what actually feels better to me right now is to rest.
Mm-hmm.
um, and then and just even attending to what are those little things, whether it's drinking iced tea or hot tea, or whether it is having a conversation before intercourse or not, like, you know, the
Mm-hmm.
more that we can attend to, like, actually what really would make me feel good right now, I think is another way that we can, you know, find our path out of pain, in whatever we're experiencing. And like you said about discomfort, I often think about that with birth, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
labor is work. Labor by definition is work.
Yeah.
I think of pain as something that is, you know, wrong or being
Mm-hmm.
inflicted on you, you know.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
like you said, if you can be present with birth, there is a way to see it as the necessary work of bringing a baby out of your body, the
Yeah.
necessary labor of it.
100%.
And now, mind you, there are different ways and circumstances that that discomfort can really resonate and feel like pain if we're not in a space where we're fully able to move
100%.
and
Yeah.
be supported in the way that we actually need. And I think that's when it really does become pain, when you're being told, well, you need to be in this space and you cannot do this and you cannot do that and you cannot have this person and that person, everybody who, makes you feel safe and supported around you. So again,
Yeah.
like that kind of trifecta of periods, intercourse and birth, like we need like a whole rebranding that, um, pain is not the
I'm
only way
I'm
to
glad you
experience
said that.
them.
I'm glad you said rebranding, because literally what was running through my mind now is, wouldn't it be so amazing if the world viewed that trifecta of periods, sex, and childbirth and associated those three things with pleasure?
Mm-hmm.
Like, it seems radical, but I
Mm-hmm.
know for you and I, it's possible. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's possible to experience pleasure when you're on your period. Like,
Mm-hmm.
feeling good that you're on your period, feeling grateful that you're a woman, feeling grateful that you have a period, and marveling at the amazing nature of period and your hormonal health, like experiencing pleasure in that moment of being in your period. And maybe people listening to this right now, especially if they're going through pain, that seems so far off. But I guess what you and I are trying to do, talking about this, is to show it is possible to feel pleasure. It doesn't mean sexual, it just means pleasure, feeling good, as you said, in that moment of being on your period. The same applying to sex, because I've talked about the fact that women come to me wanting to overcome painful sex, but a lot of women, once they overcome it and achieve pain-free sex, they're then really struggling with the pleasure side of sex,
Mm-hmm.
questioning themselves as to whether pleasure is something women are meant to experience during sex, because that's another thing that they grow up with, is hearing that pleasure is just for men and women don't have to experience pleasure during sex. But actually, again, seeing your periods as pleasurable, seeing sex as pleasurable, are things for women. And equally with childbirth, yes, there's a lot of discomfort, but it's, as you were saying, it's seeing that experience as something profound that's going to impact your own life, and the fact that you're helping to bring a new life into this world, and seeing that moment as something exciting and something pleasurable, even if you're feeling, intense, whether it's intense pain or intense discomfort. But knowing, again, I think the message that we're trying to share through talking about this is, the more educated we are about our bodies, the easier we will find going through periods, having sex, giving birth. And there's someone I follow on Instagram where she talks a lot about the fact that childbirth doesn't need to be painful. And again, that's messaging. People saying childbirth is just meant to hurt. So a lot of women go into childbirth feeling really afraid. I know I felt that way when I was, before giving birth to my own two kids, is thinking, I'm really afraid of the pain. I'm not sure whether I'll be able to manage it. But just, if I had been educated about knowing how to understand the purpose of contractions, the fact that contractions are not necessarily there to hurt you, it's not pain being inflicted on you. It might feel really intense, it might feel really uncomfortable, but it's actually your body doing the work for you to help bring your baby into this world. So, and seeing that, viewing that with as positive a mindset as possible, the fact that your body is there to birth this baby. And yeah, I just feel like pleasure over pain will win, inshallah.
Yeah. And one more P word to throw in there, I think, is if we're taught the power of each of these experiences,
Yeah.
that can also be because, the power of the period, there's information, right? It's an indicator of your health. There's an
Yeah.
indicator of your hormonal wellness. And then if you translate that then to intercourse, like marital intercourse is a way to feel deeply spiritual connected to your
Mhm.
partner and to experience like not just physical but also emotional and spiritual intimacy. And birth is also a pathway and an imprint that leaves a impact on you as well as your child. And then sometimes because we're so afraid of discomfort, we don't allow the process to resolve itself. And I could go
Mhm.
on, so I'm gonna not go too far, but just that when we get to it, it actually is such that the discomfort of birth actually changes our brain waves, right? It
Mhm.
takes us into a naturally psychedelic state where we are able to cope with that intensity, but that gets shortcutted by we're going to give you synthetic pain medication, or we're
Mm.
going to do this to you. And
I think it also gets shortcutted by fear. A lot of women fear that intensity and feel like, oh no, there's something wrong. And then they panic. And then the panic kind of causes that kind of vicious cycle of making the pain or the discomfort seem worse than it maybe
yes,
actually is.
yes,
So
yeah,
yeah, I think it's really
yeah.
important. Yeah.
Thank you for exchanging those thoughts with me, because it's something that I've seen the thread between our work so much, but we haven't really had a chance to kind of really pick it apart and look at it and examine it and discuss it. So thank you for your willingness to be in conversation about it, and to step into a conversation that you may not be in as often. Like we're both at like the edges of our conversations, and I think we found a really beautiful meeting point between the two. So
Thank you for having me and inviting me. I really enjoy every conversation that we have. So alhamdulillah, I'm really glad that we got to have this conversation and for other people to be listening, inshallah.
yeah, and so another conversation that we privately have is about our books that are coming
Mhm.
out this year. So if you'd like to share with us a little bit about what you're writing, what we can expect, what is your book going to be about, and when can we expect to see it?
So my book is going to be a God-conscious sex education book for anyone. I will be writing from the lens of, I'm sure you can hear some sirens right now. I will be writing this book through the lens of me being a Muslim and me being a woman. Having said that, it's not just for Muslims, but I know that a lot of Muslims will be reading this book. And the book, inshallah, so far the title is A Life of Intimacy. But the book is not just about sex or having sex within marriage. I will talk about that in the book, but it's not just that, because I personally don't see intimacy as just sex. I see intimacy as this deep emotional connection that we all need to have with ourselves, with other people in our lives, not just with our spouse, with other people in our lives, and with our creator. So I see intimacy as something that's vital for everyone to experience every day. And so that's why the book is inshallah going to be called A Life of Intimacy, because what I'm seeing is people have so many sexual struggles, not just married people. People who are not married have sexual struggles, such as struggling with sexual desire and trying to maintain their faith by, avoiding sex outside of marriage, but they really struggle with that. Parents struggling to educate their kids about sex education in a God conscious or Islamic way, not knowing how to manage some of the struggles that we see in society, such as hypersexualization. So there are so many things where I feel like, even though it's a sex education book, and I will be talking about sex and sexuality a lot, it's not really just about sex. It's more about managing struggles that happen to be struggles that people are not really able to talk about. I kind of want to help people find a way to overcome those struggles, inshallah, through the book. So yeah, inshallah, it will be called A Life of Intimacy. I had plans for it to be published towards the end of this year, 2023. However, at the moment, there are some issues with my publisher, so it seems more likely that it will be released in 2024. So yeah, stay tuned. Inshallah, it will be released when it's meant to be released.
Yeah, alhamdulillah, looking forward to it. Allah bring benefit. We ask that it's full of benefit for the community and for the readers and for yourself, and that it really does, become a tool of this rebranding that we need to do around pain and when to expect it, and pleasure, and all of these
Ameen.
things. So thank you for your time. Inshallah, people can find you at
At Amirah Zaky. So it's my name that you can see on screen, joined together. That's my handle on Instagram. I'm most active on Instagram, but you can also find my website. If you just type my name, you'll find my website. Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining me today, and thank you all for today's session, and see you tomorrow. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alaikum salam.